Why you're still broke after getting a raise. You finally get the raise you've wanted for years. For a few weeks everything feels different. You check your account balance and it looks bigger. You breathe a little easier. You tell yourself this is it. This is the turning point. Then somehow 3 months later you're right back where you started. Same stress, same tight month, same quiet dread every time a bill notification pops up on your phone. You got the raise, so why does it feel like nothing changed? This isn't a story about bad budgeting. It isn't a story about being irresponsible with money. This is a story about your brain and how it was never designed to handle the kind of money decisions modern life demands of it. By the end of this video, you're going to understand something most people never figure out in their entire financial lives. More money doesn't fix the problem because the problem was never about the amount of money in the first place. Here's what actually happens when your income goes up. Let's say you're making $55,000 a year, and after years of good work you land a promotion. $70,000, a 27% raise. On paper that's life-changing. In your head you start doing the math, extra savings, maybe a nicer apartment, finally breathing room. But something strange happens in the weeks that follow. You upgrade your apartment because now you can afford the nicer one. You start eating out more because you deserve it after years of skipping the good restaurants. You get the car you'd been putting off because the payment finally fits the budget. None of these decisions feel reckless in the moment. Each one feels completely reasonable, completely earned, completely justified. This is called lifestyle inflation, and it's one of the most quietly destructive forces in personal finance, not because any single decision is wrong, but because they compound invisibly. Your income went up 27%. Your spending, without you consciously deciding it should, often rises to match it almost exactly. Not because you're weak-willed, because your brain interprets a higher income as evidence that a higher standard of living is now safe. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Studies on income and spending behavior consistently show that as income rises, savings rates often barely move, sometimes for years. People don't feel richer at a higher income. They feel exactly as strained as before, just at a higher altitude. The treadmill didn't stop. It just got faster and you sped up to match it. So if the raise itself isn't the fix, what actually is the problem? To understand that, we have to go back much further than your latest paycheck. We have to go back about 200,000 years. For almost the entirety of human history, there was no such thing as a paycheck. No such thing as compound interest, credit scores, or 401 KS. There was food, shelter, and safety, and your brain evolved one singular obsession: acquire resources now because tomorrow is never guaranteed. If you were a hunter-gatherer 50,000 years ago and you found a surplus of food, the smart move wasn't to save it for 6 months from now. Food spoiled, tribes moved, threats were immediate. The brain that survived was the brain wired to consume opportunity the moment it appeared, because waiting often meant losing it entirely. That wiring didn't disappear. It's still running the show, just in an environment it was never built for. When your paycheck lands, your ancient brain doesn't see future security. It sees a resource that is currently available and might not be later. Buy it now, upgrade now, enjoy it now, not because you're irrational, because you're running 200,000-year-old software on a modern financial operating system it was never designed to interpret. Here's the unsettling twist. This isn't a flaw you can simply think your way out of. Willpower doesn't override instinct nearly as often as we'd like to believe, which is exactly why understanding the mechanism matters more than trying to muscle through it with discipline alone. And that ancient wiring gets a very modern accomplice, one hiding inside your own brain chemistry. You already know the feeling. You order something online. For the next 2 or 3 days there's a small current of anticipation every time you think about the package arriving. It shows up. You open it. For about 20 minutes you feel genuinely good. Then strangely, that feeling evaporates almost completely, and the object just becomes another thing you own. This is dopamine at work, and most people fundamentally misunderstand what dopamine actually does. It's not the pleasure chemical in the way pop psychology usually frames it. Dopamine is released in anticipation of reward, not really during the enjoyment of it. The chase feels better than the having, which means that the moment of clicking buy often produces more neurological reward than actually owning the thing you bought. This creates a devastating loop for anyone whose income just increased, because now for the first time you can afford to chase that dopamine hit more often, New clothes, new gadgets, subscription upgrades, nicer takeout. Each purchase gives you a brief spike. Then it fades. And your brain, always seeking the next spike, starts scanning for the next thing to buy. This is called hedonic adaptation, the psychological process by which humans rapidly return to a stable baseline of happiness regardless of positive or negative events. Win the lottery and within about a year, most people's reported happiness returns close to where it was before. Get a raise, and within a few months the new income starts to simply feel normal. The bar didn't move. You just adjusted where normal sits, and the chase for the next spike quietly begins again. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If your brain always resets to the same baseline no matter how much you earn, how much of your spending has actually ever been about the object itself, and how much has been about something else entirely? There's a second kind of inflation happening in your life that has nothing to do with the economy, and almost nobody names it directly. It's social inflation. When your income rises, your social circle often subtly shifts too. You get invited to nicer dinners. Co-workers talk about their renovations, their vacations, their new cars. And even if you never consciously compare yourself to them, your brain is doing it anyway, constantly in the background, because humans are fundamentally status-tracking animals. We evolved in small tribes where relative social standing determined access to resources, mates, and safety. Your brain still runs that calculation today, it just uses a Tesla instead of tribal rank. Here's the trap. The raise that was supposed to make you feel secure often puts you in rooms with people spending at a level your old income never exposed you to. Suddenly $70,000 doesn't feel like progress, it feels like falling behind, because the comparison group moved right along with the paycheck. This is why lottery winners and lifelong wealthy heirs often report shockingly similar rates of financial anxiety and dissatisfaction to people making a fraction of their income. It's never really about the number in the account. It's about the gap between that number and whatever number the people around you seem to be living at. So if the raise doesn't fix anything, and richer people report similar anxiety to poorer people, does that mean wealth is essentially meaningless? Not exactly, but it does mean something far more interesting is going on inside your mind than anyone ever tells you. Here's something that should genuinely surprise you. Financial researchers have found that people earning $30,000 a year and people earning $300,000 a year often make remarkably similar psychological mistakes with money, just at different zeros. Both groups frequently struggle with delayed gratification. Both groups often spend based on identity rather than need, buying things not because they're useful, but because they signal who they believe they are, or who they're afraid they aren't. And both groups can experience something called scarcity mindset, a mental state where the brain becomes so preoccupied with what it lacks that it loses the cognitive bandwidth to plan effectively for the future. Scarcity mindset isn't just a poverty phenomenon, either. Researchers have found that even wealthy individuals can operate from scarcity thinking if they were raised with financial insecurity, or if their spending consistently outpaces their income regardless of how large that income is. The nervous system doesn't calibrate to your bank balance. It calibrates to the gap between what you have and what you feel you need, and that gap can exist at any income level. This is the part that reframes everything. Your identity is often driving your spending long before logic ever gets a vote. If you see yourself as someone who works hard and deserves nice things, you will find ways to spend that confirm that identity, regardless of what your bank account can actually sustain long term. The raise didn't create this pattern. It just gave the existing pattern more fuel to work with. Which leads to the only question that actually matters here. If the pattern is psychological rather than mathematical, can more income ever actually fix it? Or is there a different kind of fix entirely? Here's where most financial advice fails people. It focuses entirely on the math and completely ignores the mind. Budgets, spreadsheets, percentage rules, all useful, all incomplete, because if the underlying psychological pattern isn't addressed, the math simply becomes another thing to rationalize around. The real escape starts with a single shift, separating identity from consumption. Ask yourself before a purchase a very specific question, not can I afford this, but am I buying this because I actually want it, or because it confirms something I'm anxious about proving? This single question interrupts the automatic loop more effectively than almost any budgeting app ever will, because it targets the actual mechanism, not just the symptom. The second shift is automation, not as a productivity hack, but as a psychological workaround. Every dollar that moves into savings or investments before you ever see it in your checking account bypasses the dopamine chasing, identity confirming, status comparing brain entirely. It never gets the chance to rationalize. This is why the people who build wealth most consistently aren't usually the ones with the highest willpower. They're the ones who removed willpower from the equation altogether. The third shift is the hardest and the most powerful, redefining what enough means on your own terms before your environment defines it for you. Because if you never consciously decide what enough looks like, your brain will default to whatever the people around you seem to have, a moving target that guarantees permanent dissatisfaction, no matter how many raises you receive. None of this happens overnight, but every single decision that interrupts the automatic pattern, every dollar moved before you can spend it, every purchase questioned instead of impulsively confirmed, is a rep. And like any rep repeated enough times, it becomes the new automatic pattern instead of the old one. So why are you still broke after getting a raise? It was never really about the raise. It was never really about willpower or discipline or being bad with money. It was about a brain built for scarcity. Operating in a world of abundance, it was never designed to navigate chasing dopamine spikes that fade in minutes, measuring itself against a moving social bar, and defending an identity it never consciously chose. The number on your paycheck changed, the mind interpreting that number did not. And that's the real insight hiding underneath all of this. Money was never actually the test. Money is just the mirror. It shows you exactly what was already there, your fears, your comparisons, your unexamined beliefs about what you deserve and what you're afraid of losing. A bigger paycheck doesn't erase those things. It just hands them a bigger stage to perform on. Money doesn't change your mind. It reveals it.